Welcome. The Passive Sampling Technology Update team is proud to present an overview of the Passive Diffusion Bag, PDB, Passive Sampling Technology. This quick video will provide a high-level overview of the device, as well as instructions on how to use, deploy, and retrieve the device. For more information on the PDB device and other passive sampling technologies, please visit the Passive Sampling Technology Update Guidance document. The Passive Diffusion Bag Sampler is an equilibration-type passive sampler. PDBs operate using the principles of molecular diffusion from an aqueous medium, across the semi-permeable polyethylene membrane, into the sampler that is filled with deionized water. This sampler may be applicable for use in multiple types of media including groundwater, surface water, and sediment pore water. The semi-permeable membrane has small pores that allow molecules of nonpolar volatile organic compounds, known as VOCs, to diffuse through the membrane. When VOC contaminants, illustrated by the green dots, are present on one side of the membrane, a concentration gradient exists between those molecules and the deionized water on the other side of the membrane, which contains no contaminant molecules. The gradient causes VOC molecules to diffuse from high to low concentration, through the membrane pores and into the deionized water until the concentration between the target media and the water in the sampler are at equilibrium. To make use of this natural diffusion property, the membrane is shaped into a tube and filled with deionized water. The filled sampler is installed into any aqueous medium, such as a groundwater monitoring well shown here. Once equilibration is reached, the concentration in the sampler will adjust to changing conditions and represents the surrounding medium over the past several days. The main parts of the PDB sampler are a semi-permeable polyethylene membrane with a fill nozzle and a plug. This is filled with deionized water prior to deployment. A protective mesh outer cover. A reusable suspension tether with a well ID tag and PDB connecting rings, and a reusable stainless steel weight at the bottom. Zip ties to connect the PDB to the tether line, and a well cap from which to hang the top of the tether. PDBs require very few components or accessories, and the recommended parts are inexpensive, lightweight, and easy to use. These include a PDB selected to best meets project objectives and well diameter, a reusable suspension tether with pre-installed connection rings or loops to which the PDBs are attached, a reusable well cap from which to hang the suspension tether within the well, reusable stainless steel weights attached to the bottom of the suspension tether, zip ties for attaching samplers to the tether, 2 per sampler, discharge straws for emptying the contents of the PDB into a lab bottle after sampling. If PDBs are not factory pre-filled, a reusable fill kit and deionized water are needed to fill the sampler prior to installation. Before using PDBs on a new project, consider the following. Confirm that the contaminants of interest are nonpolar VOCs. Note that there are special cases that do and do not diffuse into standard PDBs. For first-time passive sampling in wells having saturated screens 10 feet or longer, consider using 2 or more PDBs at different intervals in several representative wells to determine if the contaminants are stratified and to select the optimal PDB depth to meet project DQOs. For fast-moving surface water or sediment pore water sampling, the PDB can be placed in a protective screen canister, and the canister installed in the sediment or water. When planning what sampler to use, select the largest diameter PDB that will fit the well diameter. Standard PDBs for 2-inch and larger wells are available pre-filled, or they can be purchased empty and filled in the field. Use ASTM Type 1 deionized water when field filling. PDBs are also available for 1.5-inch wells and 1-inch wells, pre-filled only. PDB suspension tethers can be purchased from the factory or field fabricated from a measured length of polypropylene tether rope. The following components are used to fabricate a reusable suspension tether: spool or winding frame to hold the tether, a well ID tag to match the tether to the well cap connection at the top to support the tether in the well, reusable stainless steel weight at the bottom, 2 connection rings for each PDB. Stainless steel connection rings are embedded in the rope braid for attaching PDBs at predetermined depth locations. 1 ring for the top and 1 for the bottom of each sampler. If unfilled PDBs are purchased, fill empty PDBs to the top of the nozzle with ASTM Type 1 deionized water, and insert the red plug. Collect a QA sample from the DI water source at the project site. If pre-filled PDBs were purchased, be sure the DI water blank travels with the samplers and then collect a QA sample from the travel blank at the project site. When deploying PDBs, check the water depth to be sure the PDB will be completely submerged in the saturated screen. Secure the PDB sampler to the preset connection rings on the tether using zip ties. Be sure the top and bottom of the PDB are secured. Lower the tether and PDB to the predetermined depth within the well. It is usually advised that tethers are constructed so the weight rests on the bottom of the well when the sampler is at the proper sample depth. When multiple PDBs are used on the same tether, attach the bottom sampler first and add each additional samplers to the rings as the tether is lowered. Secure the top of the tether to the bottom of the cap. Do not place the tether between the well cap and casing, as this could allow surface leakage into the well. Here the technician is checking the water level before installing PDBs to verify that the PDB will be fully submerged in the saturated screen. Some VOCs, like acetone, do not readily diffuse through the membranes when in water, and, if found in the sample analysis, are usually from exposure prior to PDB installation. A QC sample of the deionized source water used to fill the PDB or a travel blank from a pre-filled PDB can help eliminate suspicion that the well was the source for these contaminants. To obtain a QC sample, use a pre-packaged discharge straw to pierce the travel blank membrane. Fill the lab bottles and ship to the lab as required by the lab method. If the PDBs are purchased pre-filled, order a DI water travel blank with the PDBs. Travel blanks are made from the same polyethylene membrane material as the PDBs, contain DI water from the same lot, and are exposed to the same environments during transportation to the well site. If the PDBs are filled off-site, it may be best to use the contents of one PDB from each water batch as a travel blank that is discharged to a lab bottle at the site. If the PDBs are filled at the well, sample from the water container. To attach PDBs to the suspension tether, first locate the tether with the ID that matches the well. Snip the zip tie holding the end of the tether to the spool. Start to unspool the tether and check to be sure the weight is securely attached to the bottom of the tether. Place the weighted end of the tether into the well, or hang from a tripod so that the first pair of connection rings is reached. The PDB should fit between the rings. Place a zip tie through the tab or loop at the top of the PDB, and through the corresponding connection ring, and zip the PDB to the ring. Place a second zip tie through the loop on the bottom of the PDB, and zip tie the loop to the corresponding ring on the tether. The excess zip tie length can be snipped off for neatness. Continue unspooling and repeat the connection process for each additional PDB on the tether. The connection should look similar to this when completed. Remember, only the zip ties are cut to remove the sampler during retrieval. The tether and rings are reused and the depth location is always the same. Lower the tether and PDB until reaching the connection between the tether and the spool. Wrap the tether around one hand before detaching the tether from the spool to prevent accidental loss down the well. Unsnap the tether from the spool and snap it to the ring on the bottom of the well cap. If there is extra tether above the well cap connection, gather it together and place in the well below the well cap. The extra tether can be zip-tied for neatness, or removed if there will be no future depth adjustments. Do not place the tether between the well cap and casing, as this could allow surface leakage into the well. The PDB requires a minimum residence time, MRT, of 14 days before recovery. PDBs should be left in the well for at least 2 weeks to allow for the well to resume natural flow after being disturbed and for chemical equilibrium to occur. Once this minimum residence time has been met, the PDBs may be left in place indefinitely, and will represent concentrations at the time of removal. When it's time to collect the PDB sample, remove the well cap and collect water level measurements if needed, before removing the PDB. Connect the tether to the reel. Pull the PDB sampler out of the monitoring well or surface water by winding the suspension tether on a spool or frame. Secure the tether above the ground and snip the zip ties to remove the PDB from the tether. The connection rings should remain attached to the tether. When retrieving PDBs, it is helpful to have the area prepared with a plastic ground sheet, a bucket, VOC sample bottles, and a cooler with ice. An optional tripod can be used to hold PDBs, but is not required. Begin by removing the well cap and attaching the top end of the tether to the spool or frame. Spool the tether and PDB out of the well. Snip off the zip ties and remove the PDB from the tether, leaving the connection rings in place on the tether. Set up sample bottles on a flat surface. Within a few minutes of PDB recovery, transfer the water from the PDB into sample bottles by piercing the PDB membrane with the discharge straw provided in the box with the PDBs. Manipulate the straw and the PDB to control flow into each bottle. Fill the sample bottles, preserve, cap, put on ice and ship according to standard lab-required procedures. Dispose of the used PDB and zip ties according to local regulations. Locate the discharge straws that came with the PDBs and remove one straw. Pierce the PDB with the pointed end of the straw. Manipulate the straw and the PDB to discharge the sample into laboratory bottles. The PDB may be pierced again as needed as the contents are removed. Package and ship the samples as required by the lab method. After all the PDBs in a well are discharged, the suspension tether can be redeployed following the same procedure as the original installation. Fasten a new PDB to the connection rings on the tether using zip ties. Lower the tether and PDB into the well and secure the well. Return and retrieve the PDB at the next sampling event anytime after the 14-day minimum residence time. PDBs have the same key advantages as any passive sampler. No purging time, no wastewater, no decontamination time. In addition, PDBs also have specific advantages, some of which are listed here. They are easy to deploy and retrieve. There are no limitations to sampling depth. Samplers are low cost and commercially available. PDBs also have some specific limitations. They can only be used to sample for VOCs and cannot be used other contaminants. Note: other passive diffusion samplers are available for sampling metals, SVOCs, inorganics, PFAS, and other contaminants. See the extensive list of diffusion samplers in the guidance document. PDBs require a 14-day minimum residence time for equilibration before they can be recovered and sampled. PDBs may be used across multiple media including groundwater, surface water, and sediment pore water. PDBs are an equilibration-type passive sampler. They use the principles of molecular diffusion across the semi-permeable membrane. PDBs reduce sampling costs. PDBs are easy to deploy and retrieve. There are no limitations to sampling depth. Samplers are low cost and commercially available. The samplers are limited to VOCs and require a minimum residence time of 14 days with no maximum deployment time. Thank you for participating in this ITRC educational video. For more information about passive diffusion bag samplers and other passive sampling technologies, please visit the online passive sampling guidance document.